What you just heard is something I created on the weekend, and I haven't recorded the process of creating it. But in this video, I'll show you what I did and how it works, so from the concept. And you can also download the project afterwards on my Patreon. So keep watching. Okay, so we start with the drum groove, and I'm using the drum machine, Bitwig Studio, so you can see we don't need external instruments or external VST devices. So drum machine here, I'm using a drum pack of from Mr. Bill here, the Clit Shop Master, maybe some snares. Something like this. Maybe a hi-hat here. Something very simple. And then we create a beat, a groove. Something like this. We need here the global groove, a little bit of shuffle. Maybe I use my FX2, FX3 trick here with the peak limiter. With a lot of low end, maybe cut this here a bit. So we have a nice simple groove. So now comes the meat of the track, or the interesting part. And we start with the bass lines here. Maybe I dial in here first a note, probably E. We start here. Okay, so we have a nice bass line at first. A lot of distortion. Okay, and what I like to do is to use a ramp mod here, so we can switch this to synchronized mode. Also we can switch on the looping and modulate here maybe this, this operator input. And what we're trying to do now is to create multiple different bass sounds, okay? So this is the first one, this is our initial bass sound here. So now we put this here into an instrument layer with Control and G, and then we switch this with the right click to an instrument selector. So now we can duplicate the first bass here, switch to the second one, and change it a bit. Something like this. Duplicate, different sound. Next sound. Something like this. also good. Maybe go slower. Maybe pitch here also a bit from the 5th down. And the main point is that you have a lot of different sounds where you can switch through, and yeah, you get this nice glitch hop feeling. So maybe I do just one more. Okay, so we switch to the first bass here and use a step mod. It's probably not the best tune I'm creating here, but I want to just explain basically the concept of how you can approach this. You probably will take more time on each step and, you know, carefully decide what knob to turn and how it should sound, right? So now we take the step mod here, just randomize here all the steps, modulate the index, and now we get, you know, switch through the layers here, but nothing happens because we have one long note in here, right? So the layer basically changes only when you, yeah, have a note off and have a note on. So you switch to a different note. So you stay basically on the first voice here. So what we do is, of course, we use a repeater here, note repeat. And the quantizer. And we switch here on the groove, so we can apply to the quantizer the global groove setting here. Okay, and we can switch here also pretty instantaneously how this sounds by changing the repetitions and changing here the note select or the step mod. Okay, so you get a nice bass groove there. We put everything of this into an instrument selector. So we have a selector inside the note instrument layer, and then we switch this to an instrument selector. So a selector inside of a selector. We call this bass here. So now that we have the bass, we create another layer, for instance, for some musical elements. So we have it here, a polysynth, just playing this note. And we are on E, of course. And this is why these note effect devices we got are so important. It's not because you can do finally some music without knowing how the piano works. No, you can do basically pump out these kind of genres like glitch hop pretty easily, because you can rely on all these nestings here inside instrument selectors and can switch through different devices. And on each layer, you can change the notes a bit. You can change how the rhythm is for each of these notes pretty easily without, you know, fiddling around inside the note clip or have multiple tracks with the same notes, but with different rhythms. So it's much, much easier this way. So inside here, we can create now a chord with the multi-note, because we have just one note in here, right? So we want to create for this layer here, which is not the bass, a major chord. We do this by something like this. And here we can also use a note repeat. And the quantizer with the global groove on. And we get this groove instantaneously. Maybe use a small reverb here on here. maybe a phaser. Maybe we can use here also a transpose and use random mod and just switch here one octave higher. So we switch between the octaves. But every time a note comes in and we switch this to hold. That's maybe too much. Maybe we scrap this. And we put in here a key filter because we want to change probably the notes here. So we are on E and we go probably for Phrygian. So we can go into the note clip here. Maybe dial in a different groove. So now that we have basically this chord and this bass here, right? We can duplicate the polysynth here, maybe all its chords. And this here, this is an arpeggiator probably we want to use. So note repeats is something we don't need. We don't need this. This is probably also not needed. And then we use an arpeggiator here. And we use the quantizer after the arpeggiator here. So let's see, dial this in. But it's not needed because we have here the groove also inside the arpeggiator, so it's not really needed. So now we have here an arpeggiator, which is also cool. And we can use here another layer with a sampler on it. So in this sampler, we can probably use some effect sounds. So what I did in my last tune was using a water drop. Yeah, something like this. Increase the volume here a bit. So let's see, water drop. So we need also here some repeats. Quantizer. Okay, so this is something probably interesting. You can also use your multiple different FX sounds. For the next layer here, I do something like this, but with some percussion sounds. Use the sampler here. New multi-sample, and let's go for some bongo sounds here. Yeah, just drag this in. So we need to select all the samples here and remove the key tracking. And then we go here to this layer. Everything is selected. So Control A selects everything. Right click, distribute select equally. So now we have here on this page every sample on a different select setting. And then we use the step mods, of course, to switch through all the samples here. Maybe. So you can also, you know, randomize this here a bit until you like it. Oh, maybe I stay here with the Bitwig devices. So now we have here some percussion sounds, and you can completely wild with the layers here. You can use all kinds of effect sounds or vocal sounds. It doesn't matter until it sounds cool, of course. I do have some vocal chops in here. Yeah, we can basically use some different percussions in here. Something like this. Key tracking is off. Right click, select equally. So now that we have this, we can switch back to the bass here. And you guessed it, probably already, we use a step mod on here. Modulate the index. Yeah, just randomly change here the pattern. And the first bit you notice is that it doesn't change also the layers here, because we have still the long notes here going into this device. So we need, of course, repeats to chunk these long notes up into multiple sections. You can use here, of course, the repeats of the piano roll if you want to, but all these repeats are also going into the other devices. And I think, or I found, I'm much more dynamic with this approach here by using the repeats device in front of this thing here. And you can see, you know, if you have this here at 0, you have a bass sound. So you can decide on this pattern pretty easily where you want to have some bass sounds, or if you want to have more bass than musical elements and so on. And you can go for quantize here also with the groove setting on, and you can play around with the repeats here. All you need to do now is basically you have this whole track inside this instrument selector here, and you can probably guess that it's super interesting actually to go into all of these layers, go to the steps mods here and press this small little dice thing, because you can change the whole track. And if you add more of these layers here, it becomes interesting and more complex over time without, you know, going into the piano roll and painting in all these small little edits you need to do. All you have to do is basically go to the layers, push this dice button here and listen to it. And if you like it, you bounce it down to audio, or maybe duplicate here the whole track. And I'll show you this in a minute, how you can advance from this. So before we go here further, I'm going for an ozone. course, it's not indexed for some reason. Sometimes this happens, I don't know why. So all my VST3 devices are missing then. I have no idea why this happens. I haven't found out. It's pretty occasionally. So now we have this here. We want to use the matching EQ. And we can use a peak limiter at the end. Okay, so we can click this here, this layer on top, and we say after 8 bars, play other. So this applies for this and this. So what we do now is we duplicate this here, push this over here, and do the same here for these two. 8 and play order. Okay. So here on the second layer, on the second track, we just dial in here different settings. Also for the bass, maybe here. See? Something like this. Also maybe for the percussions. Different setting, and here also. Would be really nice if actually Bitwig would allow to modulate this button. Yeah, this would make this much easier when you can just click one button here in the parent device and you randomize all the nested devices inside. But it's not possible at the moment, but I'm sure we get this at some point. I think this sounds pretty great, actually. So maybe we do here the same with this one. So on this layer we also right, so you can create multiple bass, maybe do here different. If I actually would had crafted the bass a bit better, then it would sound much better. But just for this tutorial, to give you basically an idea how this works to create these kind of glitch hop sounds, I iterated a bit faster through all of this, right? So, so maybe group this together. It's music. Put the sidechain on it, so we can use drum machine. Oh, there's actually no. Okay, so I'm using here the kick only preset. This basically filters out everything from C1 to C1, which is the kick drum. So I can go to drum machine kick only filter here and only get the kick drum in here. Sounds not so great now, but when you add some effects to it, more layers of complexity, then it gets interesting fast. And I want to show you my track from yesterday I made on the weekend. It's basically the same thing, as you can see here. I have some more of these layers in here, but it's the same concept basically. It's the same thing. I'm using here some key filters for the bass and for the chords. But it's the same thing basically. I used here multiple layers of different chord settings, different devices. You can also use VSTs, of course, if you want to. So basically what you do is you take the whole complexity of editing all the stuff in the piano roll into these NoteFX layers here and switch through the layers pretty easily with the steps mod. Yeah, and it gets you very far, you know, pretty easily very far, and you can also influence how it sounds and how the switches change over time with the steps mod pretty easily. You have the quantizer here, also bringing the rhythm pretty easily in, and you can change the rhythm by changing the repeat settings here. Super easy, and then you can bounce it down to audio if you want and have nice little audio files you can mess with, right? Okay, that's it. I'll probably put this up on my Patreon here if you want to download this. So subscribe to the Patreon, leave a like if you liked the video, and thanks for watching. See you in the next video. Bye.